Okay, so let's talk Dan Lanning and hop into the mailbag, which is always open. YouTube comments or X, formerly known as Twitter, at @SMcLaughlinCFB or at LockedOnDucks, DMs and mentions wide open. If you want priority access and all sorts of other perks, go join the flock over at Subtext. This question came in from Regan. Hey Spencer, great episode. Question for the mailbag. What do you think we expected from Dan Lanning when he was hired, and what has he especially delivered on 3 years in? I did not see his crazy recruiting ability coming at all. Well, I didn't necessarily think he'd be at this level, but when you hire somebody from Georgia out of the SEC, you certainly expect to be able to have ties to schools and just kind of that region down in that part of the country. And I think that where Lanning has really excelled is putting together a staff that knows how to recruit anywhere and everywhere. And Brian Smith has talked about this several times on the show about the importance of out-of-state recruiting, since the state of Oregon only gives you maybe 4 or 5 blue chip recruits per year. There are some good players, to be sure. Oregon's got several in this class, and I'm sure we'll have several in the next class. But that number is going to be under 5 every single year. But Oregon's ability to go into Texas and Florida and California and go to Maryland or go to DC or go to Michigan, right? And get, a guy like Dante Moore initially when he was committing out of high school. Like all of that, I think, is a testament to the work that Lanning puts in on the recruiting trail. And look, when he got hired, I certainly expected that he was going to recruit well. Like Oregon at some level recruits itself, but how high it goes, that's up to the coach. And the reason I think Lanning has passed my expectations on the recruiting trail is he just pulled in the highest ranked class in the history of Oregon football, and he hasn't even won a conference championship yet. And I'll get to the results on the field in just a sec to kind of look at the other half of this question, whether you implied that I should be looking at that or not. But I think the recruiting ability has been excellent, really from the jump. I started hosting this show right around the time that he got hired, which, I wish I'd been there just a couple months earlier, but no, it's okay. It was a fun time. And so Lanning got hired, and the initial impressions were really good because you had players go in the transfer portal, and then Lanning convinced them to stay. And that was like, hey, these guys like whatever he is selling. And then the 2022 recruiting class was salvaged into a top 20 class because they landed Josh Connerly and a couple other players, but Connerly most notably, and you're going, well, hey, that was way better than expected because you had a mass exodus, of course. Some went with Cristobal, some decommitted. Guys like Kelvin Banks, for instance, went to Texas, and he's having a great career over there with the Longhorns and whatnot. That was kind of a moment where I felt, okay, I think we got something here. I think this guy knows how to recruit a little bit, and you'd think he would, coming from the SEC. But then the 2023 class came, and you went, oh, okay, that was really good. Top 10 high school class, top 10 portal class, that's outstanding. And he's just upped it another notch with the best recruiting class in program history and the number 2 portal class in the country. There are a lot of heavy hitters to go up against in the transfer portal. And for Lanning going into his 3rd year to recruit at that level, that passes my expectations. Now, I expected to be in the top 10, 15 range. Did not think by year 3 he'd be pulling top 5 high school and portal classes. That is beyond what I expected and should make Oregon fans feel really, really good about what he can do in the future and how sustainable this is. This is still relatively early in his tenure and in his experience as a head coach. And that's the other side that I've been really impressed with, his ability to put together a staff. Sometimes guys get hired to be a head coach or they become a head coach for the first time, and you learn pretty quickly, he might not be a head coach. He might just be a coordinator or a really good number 2, or doesn't have the ceiling that we're looking for at the head coaching position. There are guys like that in the NFL. There are guys like that in college. But Lanning's ability to have major coaches, like offensive coordinator, well, one offensive coordinator leave and then make another great hire. And his offensive line coach, and he makes a great hire. And the running backs coach leave, and he makes a really good hire. That's what I've been really impressed with and why I think the recruiting success has been so good. Like the head coach matters in recruiting, obviously. Obviously, that is true. He has to be able to put together a great staff. And Lanning's ability to just continually make really good hires. And I think we're going to look back one day and realize how crazy it was that Chris Hampton was a co-defensive coordinator. I think after this season, he probably gets picked up as a DC somewhere full-time at a Power 4 school, and he goes out there and kills it. And, Rashad Samples is somebody who Kenny Dillingham said could already maybe be running a college program somewhere, maybe not at the Power 4 level, but like at the G5 level. And if that guy becomes a head coach one day, it could be one of those staffs that you look back and won't be on the same level, of course, but it'll give off the same vibe as these Saban staffs. You look back and you go, wow, Kirby Smart was on the same staff as Mario Cristobal and Dan Lanning and Lane Kiffin, and they're just head coaches all over the place. So I think that's been really, really good. As for the results on the field, I think he's been about what I expected. Like, Oregon has been a place where every single coach since Rich Brooks has had a winning record at Oregon. So, yeah, I expect you to win. Oregon fans should expect any head coach that comes through to win. That is the standard. I think he hit the ground running after the Georgia game, which was, of course, a nightmare, but an awful way to begin your head coaching career. I think the on-field results have so far been good. I think the recruiting and talent acquisition with the portal has been better than the on-field results in terms of how Lanning's performed relative to my expectations. But last year was a huge year for me in terms of having confidence in Lanning, because I'll be honest, and I said this at the time, after Lanning's first year, I was a little disappointed in the defense. Or not a little, sorry. I was rather disappointed in the defense. I thought that a guy who was the DC for the national champions, who had that caliber of defense, would be able to come in and make a unit that had struggled better, and they weren't. They just were not very good. They were allowing 27 points a game in 2022. That's not good. And I thought that jump would be more substantial. I thought it would be more like what we saw last year, but that's where the talent acquisition, of course, comes into play. So, they went down about 10 points per game allowed, and I think they can be even lower than that this year with the way they brought in talent, retained guys from going to the NFL like Jeff Bossa and Jordan Birch, and the way that they've got staff continuity with Tosh Lupoy and Chris Hampton and Lanning, of course. Like, those were your top 3 defensive coaches last year. Those are your top 3 defensive coaches this year. I think all that has been really good. So I'd say A+ for talent acquisition, on-field results. I'd give him a solid B. You've put together back-to-back 10-win seasons, but there were some lapses. There have been some growing pains, and that happens. That happens as a head coach. We saw that in his first year, and then last year, just couldn't get through a great head coach. But, he's also 2-0 against Kyle Whittingham, and that's not a small thing to be able to say. There are not a lot of coaches early in their tenures as head coaches, even at great places to coach like Oregon, that can say they went 2-0 against Kyle Whittingham. It's a tough thing to do, especially in the last few years. So I think that's where he can still improve the most, and why the talent acquisition should excite Oregon fans. You're like, haven't even won a conference title, like winning games, playing at a high level, competing to play at a national championship or playoff caliber, level of football year in, year out. That's the expectation. But they haven't actually achieved those things yet. Once you do that, it can only go up. So, good question. Love it. Always keep the mailbag questions coming. Got more to get to. Is this the best men's basketball team since the Final Four run? I'll answer that question coming up next.